YouTube, another Fat Guy Builds episode. This time I'm swapping to some CPE motor mounts and transmission mounts from the TTR ones. We're trying to go a little softer since this is now the wife's daily. The other ones are a little too hard. So I'm going to go step by step. I'm going to explain the differences and just go through all that. If you love my videos, you hate my videos, whatever, you can check me out on Patreon, donate $1 or $2. That would be awesome for our channel projects that are planned for the future. And if you want these, you can go to edgeautosport.com and pick them up. Here's the part number for the transmission mount. Here's the part number for the motor mount. Not quite sure how fragile motor mounts are, considering they have to hold all the power of the focus. And yeah, so interesting. These mounts seem to be packaged very well. Here's what you're getting with the driver's side motor mount: warranty card, sticker, hardware, the different parts of the motor mount, and instructions. We're going to start here on the passenger side, and to get to this motor mount we have to remove this reservoir. So you're going to take a small flathead. There's a little clip here, and there's another one back over here. You're going to have to use a screwdriver, a metal pick, whatever you have laying around, and as soon as you get those detached, that's the only thing holding this in. Then you can pull this up and sort of slide it off to the side so that we can get to the motor mount. Because this radiator line is not flexible, squeeze these two here and then wiggle this thing out of here. You need to jack up the car just far enough where you can get another jack to support the engine from underneath. Use a 2x4, or I'm using a roll of plastic so that the jack doesn't push directly on the oil pan, because you could crack it. Jack it up to where there's pressure on the engine. Then you can come up here. Now that the engine is supported with the jack, you go ahead, take out these two bolts here and here with a 15mm, and then we'll start doing this top one. We have the two bolts out. Jack up the engine a little bit more so you're guaranteed to have zero pressure put on these. Now that the engine's supported by the jack, we're going to hold this 8mm on the top, and we're going to loosen the, oh man, anyways, we're going to loosen the nut with this 18mm. Once all the nuts are off, just go ahead and pull it off. The stock one will come off identical to that. Now clean up this area, and oh my god, clean up this area, and what you're going to do is you take your 8mm and verify that all of these are completely seated. Before we go any farther, you don't want to forget that. The reason I'm changing these motor mounts is that the durometer, which is the hardness of the rubber, is much higher on this than it is on this. So the CPE one is a 55A durometer, and the TTRs I believe are 85 or 90. So this one's almost 2 times stiffer than that one, but this one is also pretty much 2 times stiffer than factory. So this is technically 4 times or so stiffer. You know, I'm using rough numbers here, so don't get all picky if I'm off a little bit. So just think of it like that. So this one has a lot of vibration issues, especially around 3,000 RPM. On off throttle, there'll be a spot where the engine is pretty much engine braking, and you'll feel all of that. 55 is the same durometer stuff I put in the Mustang, and it is barely noticeable above stock, but it is much stiffer than stock, so it helped out a lot. So we're going to put this And then I'll put these up on the forum or something for someone to buy. These are great for track use because they don't really budge at all. So it's not a solid one, but it is pretty stiff. The way you're going to want to stack this is left side is going to be the tall part, and it's going to come down to the skinny part on your right. This top middle piece is going to have the cutouts on this side. See, it's smooth on that side. So you're going to have it face like this. Then you're going to have these cutouts. And then you're going to have the mount this way. And that'll give us the correct angle to mount everything. To install this stuff together, you're going to get some red Loctite, put 3-4 drops on each bolt. Then you're going to screw them in to the bottom. And just make sure you line this up like I told you to. Once you have them all in, go ahead and torque them down. Don't ask me the torque rating. It doesn't say even in the instructions. So just use a 1/4 inch and make that shit tight. And don't break it. Once the bottom's tight, now we're going to install the middle one onto the edge here. I installed the hardware from looking at it like this. From right, I put the bolt in. On the left side, I put the lock washer and the nut. Tighten it as hard as you can by hand. Do not torque it down yet. We're going to torque it down once everything's installed in the car. First, slide over this motor mount area part. Then we're going to put the nuts back on all 3. We're still hovering, so make sure that you're not putting pressure onto this. I like to still hold the top with the 8mm while I tighten these, because flukes happen, weird shit happens, and it's better to not strip out the head by not letting the force twist and over tighten and rip out the threads on the head. So, I mean, it takes a little longer because you can't just use like an impact or something to tighten them down, but in the big picture, trust me, it's worth it. You don't want to have to helicoil your head because you ripped out some threads. So just hold the top with the 8 and tighten them down with the 18. So my engine went back towards the firewall. So for me to line this up, it's going to be a 2-person job. So I'm going to grab my wife. She'll start the bolts while I pull on the motor. Once they're started by hand, lower the motor so all the pressure is on the flange. And now we're going to tighten these down. Torque them down to 60 foot-pounds. The final step on the passenger side mount is going to be tightening the through bolt to 75 foot-pounds. The bolt should look like this, where it's fully sticking out of the nut. Now it's time to clean everything up. Grab your reservoir, put it back, plug in that little coolant line, and this side of the car is done. Here's all the stuff that comes with the transmission mount. You have the hardware, the center part with the rubber, what looks like the top plate, warranty information, bottom plate, a sticker, and instructions. Now we're going to build it. So you need some red Loctite and a 3/16 Allen head, and then you put one washer, one of these lock washers here, onto each bolt. You put 3 drops, it says, of Loctite, then tighten them down, and you're going to tighten them to 10 foot-pounds each. This is the way it's supposed to be put together. You have the bolt head, the flat washer, and then on the other side you have the lock washer and the nut. On the driver's side mount, we have a lot of crap to get rid of. So we need to pull out the battery tray, air box. So we're going to go through step by step and deal with that. go ahead and pull the air filter out, just because you don't want to damage it when you're messing around, and it's a good time to clean it. Unplug the air sensor. Unstrap the airbox snorkel parts, like so. Loosen the hose clamps on the elbows so you can disconnect the airbox from the elbow. There's going to be a pop-in grommet underneath the box here, and one's back here that you can see. So you have to pop them out of the rubber grommet in order to get it loose enough to disconnect from the elbow. Remove the battery box top. Disconnect the positive terminal of the battery. So we have to slide this wall up and out of the way, which is going to require us to disconnect these two lines here. That way we can get the clearance to fully pull it out of the way. Once those wires are out of the way, you lift this piece up as high as it'll go, and then you pull this side out and this side out, and it'll release it. And then now you can zip tie it over here to keep it out of our way so we can do the mount. Remove the battery hold down to lift these wires out of this groove back here, and then pull the battery forward. Now we can get to the negative terminal and disconnect it from the battery. Hook the negative terminal wire off to the side and remove the battery. To remove the battery tray, you're going to have what looks like three. One here, and one down in that hole. Remove those and the battery tray should come right out. Pull the back top cover first, and then you can pull out the box, set it off to the side. At this point, you're going to want to jack up the car enough to get your bigger jack and your board or cushion or something under. You're going to support the transmission, lift it up a little bit, and then we can start removing bolts. Use a 15mm, remove the 4 nuts around the outside, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. Those 4 bolts are out, so then pull this plate out. And now you can see the transmission mount hanging, so we're going to jack it up since it's no longer being, nothing's forcing us against it. So we're going to jack it up till the plate moves, and then we're going to deal with this middle bolt. I'm using a 24mm and a breaker bar. We're going to take that nut off. Use a 15mm, take out that bolt, and there's a bolt under here. To get this bolt out, you're going to have to lower the transmission a tad. Place in the bottom half of the mount, put Loctite on the bolts, and torque them down to 60 foot-pounds. Once you have that torqued, go ahead, slide all of this in. Make sure these wires are out of the way. And this little plastic piece here is kind of irritating, so just tap it with a rubber mallet to get it to seat down onto the frame. Just like the driver's side, the engine has shifted towards the firewall, so I'm going to have to pull towards the front of the car, because right now there's a gap here and it's about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch towards the firewall. So I'm going to pull, then this plate will slide right over this mount, and then we can get to the next step. Okay, to get everything lined up, I had to use my jack handle, and I pried against the subframe and the transmission because it was a little twisted that way. Then I got it on all 4 studs, and I got it around the bushing part, and I did it by myself, so you should be able to do it too. Now I'm cleaning up the parts. Once we have these tight, we'll torque this down to 75 foot-pounds after we lower the jack and put all the pressure on the transmission mount. clean and replace this plate, and then put the 4 bolts. And now we're going to torque those 4 bolts down. Now slide in the battery box and put the 3 screws in. And then set the lid on top, but push it back far enough where we can put the wires back through this hole. Tighten the negative terminal, slide the battery back, and then put the wires in this groove. Then grab the back lid, pull it forward, and latch it halfway across. Put the battery strap back on and tighten down the nuts. There's a little hole, and then on the bottom of here is a little dicky-doo. Line up the hole in the dicky-doo. Okay. Remember, you have to pull apart the walls to get this to fit in correctly. And you're gonna slide it in and then push it down. Make sure that little dicky-doo fits in the hole. Reconnect these 2 positive wires at the bottom, and then reconnect the battery terminal to the positive wire. Once the wall is secured on the battery box, put the positive terminal back on. Now put the battery cover back on, click it into place, then shimmy your air box back in, sort of the reverse way you got it out. Reconnect the air sensor, latch it here, tighten that clamp, and put your air filter in. I'd like to thank everybody for checking out my video. I hope I saved you guys some money just by letting you do it yourself. And if you liked it, hit thumbs up, subscribe, and all that. And I'll see you next time. Wrench on.